Hi everybody, and welcome to Face It and Fix It on CBC TV 8, Facebook and YouTube. I am Joyanne Haig. Now, the last time we spoke, I ended the show on Monday telling our viewers that my mom wasn't well and that I was going to pay her a visit with someone to pray, and we did. And unfortunately, my mom passed the next day at 3 minutes to midnight. I just want to say a special thank you to all of you who would have reached out to myself and my family and for your thoughts and prayers during that difficult time. But I also want to say a special thank you to Dr. Lisa Bell, the nephrologist at the QEH, Dr. Russell Broom-Webster from the Diagnostic Family Clinic, Dr. Richard Ishmael, Dr. Reefer, and of course, Nurse Seeley. If you're watching, thank you so much, because she is the nurse in the kidney unit at the QEH hospital who always check on mom constantly. And of course, urgent care, the doctors who came almost every week, Dr. Bandele, Dr. Makiba Brooks, Dr. Hines, Dr. Nadia Clark, Dr. Edwards, Dr. Molyneux, and Dr. Marshall, who came the night to when my mom passed. And a special thank you to our caregiver, Lisa Ford. We couldn't have done it. Mom was so happy that you were there. She really warmed up to you, and I want to thank you. And a special thank you going out to my sister, Judy Lorne. We know her as Selena Spice. Judy worked 3 jobs and then came home every night to be there for mom. And kudos to you, Judy. And a special thank you, and last but not least, a special thank you to my stepdad for being there with my mom for 41 years. And my mom, if you knew her, she could quarrel a little bit. So he always put up with that, and he was quite the trooper to do it. But I want to thank you so much for being with my mom for 41 years. I said last, but I don't want to forget Dr. Clyde Kay for his advice, Dr. Joanna Bradford from the Accident and Emergency, and Jerry Warner, and bed manager Monique, and Chris Warner also as well, Dr. Chris Warner, who looked after her feet, as you know, with all of these different comorbidities. And these are things that we do have to discuss as we move forward. A lot of NCDs. Mom had a lot of NCDs, and but in the end, she's with God and she got good care, and I just want to thank everybody. Now on to the show. Now today we will have, or we're hoping to have, because we are still standing by, but we will announce him and we will let you know throughout the show if he will actually join us, or if something came up that contributed or is contributing to his delay. The Honorable Minister of Housing and Lands and Maintenance, Dwight Sutherland, he is going to bring us up to date with some of the housing projects in Barbados. And we have a lot of questions that came in for the minister, and we're hoping to answer them with him today. We also have joining us Mr. Elvis Maloney, President of the Barbados Association for the Blind and Deaf, and Dr. Adrian Daisley, a very good friend, Ambassador Plenipotentiary to Barbados, very long word, of the World Peace and Climate Change Diplomatic Organization in Nigeria. He's going to be wearing his peacekeeping hat today. His life coaching skills he is going to be wearing. And of course, we also want to focus on elder abuse. And if you know anyone that you want to share the experience, if you need guidance from us so that we can pass that information on to the relevant agencies, just remember we are here to help the agencies to face things as we continue to help fix them with you, members of the public. Remember, you can call us 228-5562 or 228-5563. If you want to send us a WhatsApp message, kindly send it to 228-5562. And you can always, as you know, catch us on Facebook by typing in CBC Barbados, or YouTube. Watch us there live. Special good morning to some viewers in Switzerland that just messaged me. People from the United Nations attached there to Geneva, my apologies. Licia Lovell and Kevin Bishop, who messaged me this morning, and they said they watched the show on Monday and that they will be tuning in. And we have some other people from Switzerland, Ajoki Fadiomi and her family, that is my sister-in-law, and my brother is here from Switzerland, obviously, for my mom's funeral. So we are being watched everywhere. Thank you so much for viewing, everybody. But stay tuned. When we come back, we are going to start our show with Dr. Adrian Daisley after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. Our first guest is Dr. Adrian Daisley, Ambassador Plenipotentiary to Barbados at the World Peace, Climate Change and Diplomatic Organization. This morning, I believe that we're going to shed some light on peace in general. We know that in Barbados, we've seen a number of incidents with gun violence and people dying on the streets, people asking themselves, what is happening? Why are people so angry? And we also want to touch on family and peace within the family, especially when a loved one dies. Sometimes you see things that you did not expect, or people may sort of behave in a way that it's not the norm, or perhaps it is who they are, and these times actually bring out who exactly they are. We don't know, but to get some answers, let's now turn to Dr. Adrian Daisley. He's not only just doctor to me, he's also a very close friend of the family. Good morning, Adrian.
A pleasant good morning to you, Joyanne. How are you doing?
Well, considering all, I am trying my best to hold on and to be strong. And as you can see, when we met on Monday, I'm smiling today because I'm trying to look forward to a positive future and to make my mom proud as she's watching me from above on TV. So, yep, she's in heaven. So let's get on to the topic of peace that we want to cover. Let's start with families. I have heard so many stories of families behaving in a different way when a loved one dies. People start to argue, emotions start to run high. We know that obviously it's a time that people are sad, but not everybody cries. Not everybody shows their grief with tears. Do you want to explain, if you can, some of the reasons from any information that you may have, any data you may have that you might have collected? Why do families, in particular, I don't know if it's a Bajan thing, but I hear all of the stories in Barbados, especially when you have to bury a loved one, and so much argument, so much anger. Tell us about that process and that grief process.
Sure, Joyanne. Grief has been showing up for many of us in a sense of an unreasonable pain. And the reason why is because you hear it all the time. People say this person had an untimely death. And sometimes it appears as though, we think that there is some kind of magic pill that stipulates when a person is supposed to pass away. Usually when a person passes, we are still not prepared. There is something in our minds that we can't come to grips with the reality of the situation of loss. Because of the unpredictability of life, this makes us feel vulnerable. And this is generally rooted in that the feeling of losing security and safety, whether perceived or real. And so many times when a person passes away, there's so many emotions that are going on the inside of the individual, and we begin to automatically switch from being a kind, expressive person, sometimes even to internalizing what we are carrying. Most of the time, people feel as though they have to approach this as a caution. For example, if you're close to the person who passed and you have another family member who wasn't that close, you feel as though you have to walk on eggshells rather than express how you really feel. And it's important that you manage the pain process. The pain process isn't only the grief process, but the pain process is also largely due to understanding that it has to take time. The challenge with handling grief is that even if you feel as though you can handle it, even if you were there at the bedside of the person, praying with the person, seeing the person through, when the person passes, and this is a very close subject to my heart, having passed through some really, really challenging experiences in this area of having lost loved ones on my journey. But it prepared me. It prepared me to understand how to be a more effective humanitarian, working across the world and looking at ways that we can actually create sustainable peace. And what sustainable peace is, when we break it down, it really is, how do I build meaningful relationships that will foster an environment of peace? And if I foster an environment of peace, obviously, then you can look forward to the future. Many times we relegate the idea of peace and sustainability to organizations, even political environments, not realizing that where we are dealing with people, we are always dealing with issues of conflict resolution and peace. And the reason why a lot of people find it difficult, Joyanne, to manage their relationships is because most of the time we don't have healthy relationships. This is true. In my own research, I have found that marriages and deaths are the two main components to bring families together and even sometimes pull them apart. Because we're talking about sometimes not speaking to loved ones over a period of time for whatever reason. Sometimes it's conflict related, sometimes it's simply just living life. When I was abroad, I would have spoken and would have seen the death of maybe 6 or 7 friends who became great friends to me over a period of 6 years in Brazil. And having to hear them say, I don't know how to handle this. Having gone through what I've been through, losing loved ones, I realized that the first thing that comes to our focus is why. Why would a loving God, a powerful being, allow this? And I have no answers for why, but I can tell you that when pain comes into our lives and allows us to pass through the process of grief, it's for our betterment. It usually doesn't seem that way initially, because initially what you're doing, Joyanne, is initially you're trying to come to grips with the reality of the loss. You're trying to find a way to decide whether or not it was sanctioned or not. For some of us, grief might show up in quiet despair, or feelings of anger. It leaves us. When we lose someone or something, it leaves us in shambles, because the ground, the foundation that you're standing on, depending on the type of relationship you've had, is moved from beneath you. Hopes are dashed, dreams are dashed. You feel that overwhelming sense of helplessness, and that's where vulnerability comes in. Be surrounding yourself with people, Joyanne, who understands not only the grief process, but also understands your emotion. Many people have not been able to manage grief because they are culturally not prepared. Their upbringing has not given them the emotional fortitude to express themselves, and so they manage it by unhealthy ways. Maybe they might turn to using abusive substances, or they might simply just be angry and expressively so. I think the most challenging that I found in therapy in dealing with persons who grieve are persons who internalize pain. Persons who internalize pain, especially firstborns. Firstborns and thirdborns internalize pain simply because they see it as their right to protect the family. And it puts an emotional strain on the individual because they feel they have to be strong for everyone. And knowing you, Joyanne, for many years, it's been a privilege to call you a friend, and I have seen you as a strong person, and I know that you have to be always strong for your family. But I am glad that everything has happened. I'm glad that I'm actually back in Barbados to be a part of the grieving process with your family as well. And obviously, I would love to send out a wonderful greeting to my friend Ajoke and Peter, and there in Switzerland, as well as we pass through this very challenging time. And I hope I answered your question, Joyanne.
Yes, you definitely did. But there's another side to this grieving process that I myself would want answers, and so many of our viewers, because I constantly hear it. A person is sick or they just passed, and you have close family members, and there's arguments about material things. Arguments about material things before even the person passes, and the family and the sense of who's entitled to what, which makes me lead me to say, and hopefully we will have this in many shows, the importance of a living will and a will. What you want after you die and what you would like if you are not well. That in itself causes a lot of confusion. So how is it that people who love each other, who see people dying or just died, how do you try to grab the material things before they even die? What triggers that?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it really goes back to security, Joyanne, because you see, families don't always cope well with grief, and part of the difference is because of the way they internalize grief. People want to hold on. Sometimes they're not only going after a physical thing, they're also going after the feeling that they get, the value of the thing replaces the image of the person who's passed. But also there are people who have selfish intentions as well. Let's call a spade a spade. And my therapy, I'm very honest and very upfront, because I think that we need not to normalize, we need to normalize conflict, but not normalize the bad emotions that are fostered by misunderstandings. The time of grieving is the time to talk. It's a hard place to be because Joyanne, is difficult to talk.
But when you say, not to interrupt you, but when you say talk, I could tell you in Barbados, the discussion don't be just talk. It is be colorful language.
Yes.
Where you came from, you didn't wrong, you this, you that, the third, a whole history, your present and your future. And before you answer that, because I know we're going to have to take a quick break, so this is why I'm going to try to wind down until the break. That is not communication. And then when people say, oh, just sit down and talk, there's some people that you can't just go and hug and sing kumbaya around a fire. They just ain't doing it, and as much as then people want the person who they know is the most peaceful, they want them to go in and get their heads chopped off because they happen to be the peaceful one. And they try, but it doesn't happen. But when we come back after the break, we're going to talk more about this peacekeeping in families. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the violence that we're seeing on the streets when we come back after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. We're speaking with Dr. Adrian Daisley, Ambassador Plenipotentiary to Barbados at the World Peace and Climate Change Diplomatic Organization. We're talking about peace today. Very, very important to have a peace of mind. And so many people can't seem to get it. They try, but they seem to get pushed back in or pull themselves in, or push themselves in rather, back into the chaos. And it takes two hands to clap. But I don't know, and maybe you can tell me about egos as it relates to having those civil conversations and be diplomatic. But you know, people say when diplomacy dies, then war starts. So let's go back with the families. What kind of recommendations for people who, no matter what you say, and I know Bajans know that they got somebody, everybody got somebody in the family that pulls in a different direction. How do you manage that?
Sure. Well, first of all, Joanna, thank you again. Listen, relationships are complicated. And when a person passes away, it doesn't fix a broken relationship. When a person passes away, it sheds light on that lack of relationship. And if you can't take the emotional sit down, have a, open communication, view, then you might have to take, a logistical view and maybe seek legal help, especially when property is involved. Families who communicate openly about illness and death, they express emotions, have been seen to be the people who manage the stress and the grief process better. But not all families are like this. And unfortunately, even within the Caribbean context, family relationships are sometimes very strained. And for whatever reason, we don't have always healthy relationships. And especially within poorer communities, which is something that I would hope that as humanitarians we would look for ways to address. Also, if you have that person in your family who's always pulling in the other direction, creating stress or conflict, sometimes it's healthy to isolate yourself from that individual. No matter the cost, you have to protect your mind, Joyanne.
Well, you do, but there are times where you do live in the same house sometimes, and it is very hard to separate yourself from that, because then you have to hear it over and over again. So when we hear families talking about people pulling in different directions, they're arguing. I think it was a couple of days ago, a police a friend of mine said that they were so busy that they had to deal with 13 people at the same time coming to the station with a big argument, and all family members. The Bible said, and I don't really want to do the religious thing, but a lot of things can come back to the Bible, truth be told. Yeah. When the first murder took place, Cain killed Abel. Yeah. And I don't know if there was something in that tells me, watch your family, because it may not be the strangers on the street that you get in an argument with. It starts with the family. The peace begins at home, and peace was broken in the Bible in the beginning between two brothers. How do we bring the Bible and the teachings of God and what we do day to day to fix this? Yeah.
I'm really, really happy that you raised that subject, Joyanne, because I think being a religious society, sometimes we relegate the conflict resolution to a pastor or a leader, not realizing that we are also a part of that process as well. If I have peace within myself, then I can create peace within my home. I might not be able to control how another person treats me, but I can control how I respond to another person. And having a relationship with Christ is exceptionally important, very important, And I know that, for the general public, sometimes people shy away from conversations that lean towards, the religious side. But even within grief, it's important to have a foundation. It's important to be able to fall back on, a spiritual guide to help you through. Because no matter who you are, Joyanne, you cannot manage conflict alone, and you cannot manage grief alone. It takes another hand, as you mentioned earlier, to clap. And if you are, there at the sound of my voice, and you are, going through a difficult time, you know, I would advise that you find a way to connect to the Creator, because, within the context of my life, that is the only solace that I found to help me through conflict times, points of grief. And apart from that, there are other techniques that you can employ as well. I recommend people plant a tree, for the memory of the person who passed, for example, and you only commune by the tree. Pass your emotions, your energy there as well. The other thing, Joyanne, is that I want to make it clear that conflict is real, and there is no. Sometimes it appears as though the humanity in people leave when there's grief. And this is because simply we haven't learned to handle grief as a society. Even when a person is going through grief, it is still only the responsibility of the immediate family members and close friends, and maybe a pastor, to help them through. But grief is a community issue. I think if we're going to build, sustainable environment and inclusive society, we need to start looking at how we as a society, handle grief together. In the old days, when a person passed away, everybody in the community went to the funeral. Sometimes not even knowing the person. Now, apart from the COVID environment and stuff, Joanne, we've pulled away from the reality of what it is to be human. And the closer we get to being a corporate society, a society of great wealth and stature, we move away from the very essence of being human. And within every, international forum that I would speak, I would always talk about, the role that peace plays in building a society, an inclusive society. And inclusive society means I have to let you share your opinion, Joya, and whether or not I like your opinion. The challenge is control. Everybody wants to control an environment, especially if you live in an environment with a person who thinks that they should be heard, they should be listened to, and they should be obeyed. And so obviously you need to manage that situation, because you might be dealing with, a narcissistic personality there that doesn't leave room for growth, doesn't leave room for talking, doesn't leave room for being reasonable. I hear people say all the time, but this person is acting really unreasonable now that this person is gone. And the reality is that it isn't that the person is a bad person. Um, some people have lots of really negative things on the inside of them, and death brings it out. But there are other people who are good, Joyanne, but they have to learn how to state their position, stand on their view, represent what they believe, and still create an environment where other people can share. I'm sure you are aware that in the Caribbean context, sharing in the families is something that is a bygone concept, and we need to bring it back. And the only way we're going to bring it back is if we face it and fix it. That's why I love this program, because I think that what this program is doing is creating a voice in the nations for persons to be able to not only find the problems and look at the process. How did they get to where they are? Many people come to me and ask me for a red pill. They say, Doc, I just want this problem of conflict between me and my family to be resolved. And it doesn't happen like that. Usually you have to take them through a 6-month process in looking at what caused the problem in the first place. But they want immediate relief. And the challenge with therapy is that over the years, people have come to see therapy as something that you go to just because you have a problem. But therapy needs to become a part of society. It has to become We have to unstigmatize therapy. We have to make it that if you are hurting, it's okay to say that you're going to a therapist. Even within the American context, for example, therapy is like having a sports coach. You know, it's a normal part of society. But even in the context of society, mental health is managed in an unhealthy way because we somehow relegate mental health and suffering to be the work of the devil, not realizing that anyone at any point in time, Joanna, is bordering on suicidal thoughts. Anyone, no matter what your social status, you are bordering on that place of being able to lose it at any time. It's just
And it's not
a
even about
small
suicide.
percentage.
It's not even
Yeah.
about suicide. It's about even that person hurting other people that we would have seen in the U.S. now over the last couple of years, those shootings, etc. But one of the things, I bring this back to me. This is my opinion. I don't know if the public would agree. I look at when you do something. I look at the moral compass. You ask yourself when you see some actions of how people behave, where's your moral compass if you're lost, So this is how I guide myself. I'll pull myself back if need be.
Yes.
There are things
Yeah.
in life that you will do that will hurt another person, and it may not be deliberate. One of the things, you got to break off a relationship. It's toxic. The person may not want that. They're hurt by it, but you had to make that decision. Number two, a job loss. You may have to make a decision as a manager that you have to let go of staff because maybe you don't have any money or something, and maybe the person wasn't performing up to scratch. And then you have to make that tough decision, and that hurts the other person. Those two actions were not deliberate, but there are actions that you have to take, and it hurts. But look at all the other actions now that we do. We want to put people in trouble by making up stories about them because you don't like them. You can cost them their job because of a lie. You can, all of these types of things. So to me, I'm thinking the first thing is, okay, Joy, even if the situation is true about the individual, is it necessary to even say something about it? Is it necessary to even share it? Because if you can't sit down for a moment and think about, and perhaps maybe this is not fair to the public because you got to practice this because I do a lot of risk management with communication. You got to know that when you say A, B, and C, or type it on a WhatsApp, on a text message, and it gets sent out there, what the end result? Chaos, fighting, arguing. So I normally practice that, and I try my best. Don't get me wrong, I'm perfect. There are times colorful language will come out of my mouth and I will pull back and go like, shouldn't have said that. But you're human. But for the most part, you try your best to say, you know what? Hold on. If I do this, this is going to end up in a problem and cause great issues, hurt, pain,
Yes.
fighting. So I think that this was missing. I think that people don't count to 10. They don't look and see whether or not this is necessary to share, and the ego then kicks in. Who she thinks she is. She tell me this, I can call so-and-so and I can tell so-and-so, and then so-and-so friend calls so-and-so and she said that about me, and then that cause somebody to react, to do something even bad, even to hurt somebody. What are your
Yes.
thoughts on narrowing it in and zeroing it into the ego and your
Of
moral
course.
compass? What are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Well, first of all, Joy, and I think that we have to remember boundaries. I, you know, I try to have simple conversations about these subjects. People like clinical terms, neurolinguistic programming, cognitive behavior therapy. But when we are dealing with a family member, all of those terms we throw out the door because the reality of being human is something that we as a society hasn't embraced. For example, we all lose our cool sometimes. We all, at some point in time, let ourselves go to that place where you can't pull back that anger. having anger management as a part of your process is important. And I am always going to pull people back to the environment of therapy because it works. It not only works, but it also creates a standard. You talk about your moral compass, Joyanne. You know, for some of us, my moral compass is Christ, but not everyone has a religious affiliation. Not everyone has a relationship with God. There are some people who choose other forms of, spiritual expression. You know, for those people, we're talking about how have you seen your family managing grief, anger, expressing themselves, even handling conflict. Most of the time, the way I have learned to manage conflict is how I see my family manage conflict, how my mom, my father manage conflict. And unfortunately, sometimes, especially in the older environment, people manage it in a very unhealthy way. You have a problem, you don't address it, you don't talk about it, you don't look at it, you just ignore it until it goes away. And invariably, it never goes away. It just compacts the situation. So it's important, Joyanne, to create an environment where somebody has to listen to someone. And if they're not going to listen to a family member, let's say the person is causing chaos, or I've heard of cases of people taking persons' clothes and burning them, and locking people out, and all kinds of expressions of hate, anger. We need to understand that you can't treat another individual like that, and no individual should put up with that kind of behavior, whether it's your aunt, your uncle, your sister, your brother, your cousin. If you think about it, Joyanne, in Barbados, for example, we have many, many, many cases of abuse. And we have cases of abuse because people refuse to face it, and they refuse to fix it because they think that if I ignore it and sweep it under the carpet, it will go away. I tell people, just like marriage does not end in the day that a person makes the decision to get a divorce. Marriage ends when abuse starts. Marriage ends when a person decides in their mind they can't put up with this anymore. Sometimes people would cast aspirations on you. They would say bad things about you, and you would lose friends. The most times that I have seen people alone is through a divorce or through the death of a loved one. And we shouldn't be that way as a society. We should be more compassionate, more understanding. We should create an environment that fosters peace. But unfortunately, we don't always. Governments need to make sure that peace is a part of the process of sustainability. And this is one of the reasons why, in my position, we are standing at the intersection between, peace and security and diplomacy and climate change. Because no matter how we look at it, Joyanne, all of these situations are interrelated. And to stay to stay in my church, for want of a better expression, or in my corner and pray for me and pray for my family is not going to cut it. We need to face it and fix it. To face it, we need to face it together. We need to realize that Joya might not have the answers, but she has a part of the answer. She might have a part of the puzzle. I begin, as I've worked around the world now, I have come to have a broader perspective of life and family. And the biggest lesson that I learned, Joyanne, is in Brazil. I saw and have an appreciation for family, because I saw people with nothing holding their families tightly and trying to find a way to manage situations, but they did it together. I didn't see people going off and leaving their loved ones to make a better life for themselves, even though unfortunately, sometimes that's the reality that we face. In 2008, which began the biggest financial crisis the world has ever seen, and continues until today, and as exacerbated by COVID, exacerbated by all these other, and even the war between Russia and Ukraine. We're now living.
That's a classic example of what I want to discuss right after the break. Everybody feels they're right. Let's talk about that after the break, because that is what causes the confusion, where everybody feels that they're right and nobody recognizes when they're wrong. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. I'm speaking with Dr. Adrian Daisley, Ambassador Plenipotentiary to Barbados at the World Peace and Climate Change Diplomatic Organization. Today we're not talking climate change, we are talking peace, world peace, but in particular peace here in Barbados, in Barbadian homes and on the streets. Before the break, I said to Dr. Daisley, my friend Adrian, and by the way, when he said a joker, he was referring to my sister-in-law who's watching from Switzerland. So a special good morning again to her. When everybody feels that they're right, I can give you some scenarios that were shared with me. And when you look at it, you now see why governments must draft legislation in order to protect. For example, there's an incident that was shared with me with a daughter who knew their mother had dementia and made her sign a document putting her in charge of her house and various things, and the lady had dementia. Now people may say, but where is the documentation for the dementia? But what was shared with me is that the young lady was telling everybody that her mother had dementia, but yet did these things. How do we protect people now? And this caused now, from what I understand, anger amongst the right-thinking family members. This is why I was pushing on who's right and who's wrong. And yeah. How do people, they argue in the right? Is it that we missed something growing up? Is it that they weren't taught morals? I get a little lost. Yeah. And educated yes. people too. So when people talk about poor people behaving in this way, there are a lot of educated people, but then education does not mean applied sense. I wouldn't even call it common sense, because if it was common, everybody would have it. So, and we know everybody ain't got it. So we call it applied sense. How do you manage these things? I mean, this is why I'm saying that the law, the government, legislation, we got to be able to legislate these things, because when you can't keep the peace because it is triggered by these actions, the law then has to apply. Yes. Your response?
Of course. But in order to talk about, social integration of peace, Joyanne, you also have to consider how people perceive the law within the context of our society because of, slavery. A lot of people don't perceive the law as a helpful tool. They don't see it as a part of managing the system. And lots of people operate in silos. For example, the scenario that you mentioned, government has the authority to enact legislation to address issues, especially elder abuse. But the problem is that sometimes people think that it's my family. I can do whatever I want with my family. How dare you tell me? We get it a lot even within the context of dealing with our children. Who does this person think they are telling me how to raise my child? And so sometimes in society we want to be right so much that we ignore the feelings of others It's really, really deplorable what you've mentioned concerning that situation with a person having an elder person sign a document when they know that they're not in the best mental acumen. And so I think, Joyanne, that before we get governments involved, we need to also sensitize people to what the rights of the individual is, because we hear about human rights. But do you know, if you stop anyone on the street and have a a conversation, even with educated persons that you mentioned, lots of them don't know what are human rights, what human rights are, and if the government doesn't tell them, they think that it doesn't exist. And so I think that government has to play a huge role in information dissemination, as well as educating, I should say informing, not educating, because we have a lot of programs, a lot of information out there. But sometimes people don't connect with that information, Joyanne, because as far as they're concerned, they don't see how it directly affects them until they lose a loved one or until they have a war. We shouldn't have conflict between families about houses and land and all of those things. But sometimes what happens is that the older person or the younger person who has the property does not put anything in place to support their emotional view that says, I want this person to handle my estate or that person. And sometimes we also have persons who fall dead without any warning. I've seen this on two occasions in my life, and that conversation about property or anything was not had. And so when money is involved, Joyanne, sometimes humanity goes out the door. And this is one of the reasons why in our world we have, profit over principles, we have human gain over humanity. And so this is why we as a human species have to mobilize and begin to say to our leaders, hey, what is your moral view on this situation? The other thing I would like to mention, Joyanne, that is very important is that we have to make sure that when we talk about moral compass, that people understand that we're not just talking about Christianity, we're simply talking about the way, the thing that guides my behavior. In our cases, we are Christians, but there are other persons out there who might be Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu, and show respect to what they believe. Of course, I believe that it's important to come to a knowledge of a saving relationship with Christ. I believe this with all my heart, and this is the ethos, on the mountain that I stand in every decision that I make. But even sometimes as a leader, I can't determine policy using morality. And this is where, the separation of church and state has done a real injustice to the way we handle and manage our society. There was a time where there was no separation of church and state. And so my relationship with God was seen as both personal and also corporate. And lots of people tell me now, if I am going to work for a person who's religious or, have a conflict with a person who's religious, I prefer not to, because sometimes even that person's compass is very, very low. And that's something we did talk about, the cultural context of being right, even in our political arena. Sometimes we find that people prefer to just share their opinion rather than hear another person. Being a diplomat now, I have had to sit across the table from leaders and learn from them. How do you talk about a situation without offending other people? And it's important not to offend other people, because when you offend another person, you close the door. You close the door to conflict resolution. You close the door to communication. You close the door to open dialogue. And it's important to have open dialogue. If I don't know what you're thinking, I can't face it, and I can't fix it, Joyanne.
But there's some people, as I said, and God knows we've all encountered people that no matter what you do, you could call God direct as much as you call him out and say, please, please, please. Nothing changes. You pray for them. you know, sometimes you disassociate yourself. We have a couple WhatsApps here that we want to share with you, and the producer will put them up on the screen when he can. But in the meantime, I want to share things like with the elder abuse, where you have people, for this one incident that I was made aware of, where an individual was giving medication to an older person, but they were not taking the instructions from the doctor. They were making the changes to suit themselves, because that person then, from what I understand, had a mental health issue. So you had a person who was suffering from a mental health issue trying to then look after a person who's old, and then their medication, that mental health person felt that they were a doctor and then adjusting the medication. Now those situations are unique, but the point is it happens. And then we got to be able to, you know, you hear about these things in the States, they call it Munchausen's syndrome. But if you look deeper here in the Caribbean and in Barbados, you probably will come across a few people who believe that they're doctors, and, you know, but there's one asking here, what about an eye for an eye?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. And you see, you always have to remember to the individual asking about an eye for an eye. An eye for an eye is when we're building a society of warfare. An eye for an eye is when you're talking about a social context that does not leave room for communication. We're talking about an environment where people do not see it as important to talk. Eye and for an eye is relegated only to warfare. When you're talking about my mother and my sister, I'm not dealing with an eye for an eye. And if we are, then we should. There's someone who asked me recently about the 78 laws of power, and one of those, and it's a very selfish, egotistical view on handling life and dealing with people. But we first of all have to remember, Joyanne, always that we're dealing with individuals, we're dealing with people, and we need to. I think that based on what you said earlier, Joyanne, we need to understand that we need society to work together. We need society to work together in creating the atmosphere for that permits, you know, people not to have to go through elder abuse, or permits the environment where a doctor. I'll give you an example. Or I shouldn't give it. What I will do is I will make a statement. Even within the context of our health system, I have heard of many people who fought with doctors, fought with nurses, for two reasons. They can't get their point across because maybe the doctor doesn't want to listen, or the nurse doesn't care whether or not their loved one was in that position, you know, so they get bed sores and that kind of stuff. And sometimes I think we need a resensitizing of our society to the reality, Joyanne, of how we treat each other. Years ago, we had the NICE initiative. I'm not sure if you remember the NICE initiative.
Of course.
And do you remember the outcry where it was like, why would people need to teach another person
people to be nice? Yeah.
But yet, so it was a campaign that made a difference, and you even had children, you know, teenagers turning, you know, their perspective on how they treat each other. And so, you know, sometimes we think we don't need something, and we don't need something until we have it. This is a lesson that I learned. You know, I never say never, because what I've learned is that sometimes the Creator gives you something that you really need, but because you can't, you know, you've learned to get along without it. When you have it, then you see the value of it, like open communication, collaboration. You know, in this the social process that we're building, we're talking about building an inclusive society. But building an inclusive society starts with me as an individual. How inclusive am I with my friends, for example, or do I shy away from my friends and try and treat others that I think I'm better than them? We have a lot of issues about my for and no more in our society. The eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But all of that is warfare talk. But if you're talking about inclusive society, you can't have that. I'm sorry, caller, but you can't have that view.
Well, here's the thing about that when it comes to Let's just say somebody does something to you or threatens you. You call the police. The
Yes.
problem is when you live in an area, when you're poor,
Yes.
and if the threat isn't one that says as a direct, like I can do something, but it is menacing. It is still, you know,
yes.
sometimes and the
Yeah.
police can only do so much. So you can then tell a poor man, you need to go and get a lawyer. Now you can't afford a lawyer to go and fix this. So when the person keeps coming back, you taking the law, you see, this is where, this is ticklish, and this is where something that I
Yes.
really feel that needs fixing. There's that in between saying where the police can only do so much, and then the police
Yes.
tell you call a lawyer, but you
Yeah.
from a poor family.
Yes.
And most of these cases, not all, happening in the poor communities.
yes.
So,
yeah.
Police
Yes.
come,
And-
police warn. Police
Yeah.
come back, police warn again. Police get fed up and say, listen, get a lawyer here, so we can only do
Yes.
so much. That person don't know a lawyer, and if they do, they want X amount of money. So guess what? When the person come back at them again, a big rock can get pelt, or a gun can
Yes.
get fired, and then the police then gets involved in the situation after the fact. No, not blaming the police. The law only allows them to do so much in certain situations. And perhaps the force could look at setting up a unit, and maybe they do. I know some police officers that do excellent community work in
Yes.
preventing that actually can go, and I think they need more of it. I think they need to set up a whole unit that diffuses situations and diffuse
Yes.
them and diffuse them and diffuse them. Even if they got to take them in and tell them, listen, you sit down on that bench and cool yourself. But that unit is just designed to talk, just
Yeah.
to talk. There's social workers I know that are in the police force, that they're police officers. They're trained
Yes.
social workers. Perhaps a unit could be set up. And that is the
Yeah.
problem. So, because that can lead me now to the violence that we're seeing on the outside. We're hearing, and Bajans are tired. They're immune to it now because nobody feels any way anymore when you hear another man down. It's okay, another one gone. Once upon a time, it used to shock the living daylights out of you to hear that somebody got murdered. Now,
Yes.
it is the norm. What could be possibly going wrong? What are some of the factors out there now related to the fact that we can't seem to be resolving things? Because obviously, as I said to you earlier, you can't be happy, because if you're happy, you can shoot somebody. So, you're angry.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, Joyanne, and you know you're raising some really interesting and as you would say, finger tickling perspectives, because the reality is that as we become more and more industrialized and more economic driven, the value of human life is going down. Um, I believe, Joya, that we are in a crisis. I believe that we're in a crisis, and I remember back, many years ago when one of our honorable ministers, who was the prime minister at the time, said, crime and violence. And I remember again, there was an outcry saying, what crime and violence? You don't see any crime and violence. But if that person was here now and they look around them, they would see that, those words have come to pass. And I think that the reason why is because the value of human dignity of the individual is something that we're no longer embracing. We practice cognitive dissonance many times. The reality of who I am and who I project to be are two different people. I think that even within a police environment, we have to remember that those people who are police are also men and women. They're individuals, they're humans. And I think that government needs to look at, employing coaches, psychotherapists to become a part of all of our social services. Employ them and give them the authority, even if you set up a national corps, like what Switzerland and other places have done, where these individuals are kind of, para organizations that support, other institutions like the police force and the army and stuff. Because you have situations, Joyanne, that are not directly that does not necessarily need legal attention. Conflict, for example, you might need conflict resolution rather than to take the road of hiring a lawyer. And I think it was back in 2021, I saw one of the major judges here in Barbados looking at employing conflict resolution specialists to address issues, especially with youth. And I think that we need to employ and empower our people, employ our professionals. We have life coaches, we have psychotherapists, we have counselors, and I think that persons who function in these areas should be intertrained, you know, in different modalities. We need to move away from this one specialist area. In my background, I've studied many things because persons come to you with so many different issues, Joyanne, that you need to find a way to bring a balance between the knowledge that you have and how you apply that knowledge in society to build an inclusive, society. And remember that, it takes a village to raise a child. I say this all the time. And I think it's going to take a village for us to address crime in Barbados. We're going to have to have the neighborhood watch again.
I think we need to get back to loving thy neighbor in order for the village to do it, because there's no such thing as the village anymore because people live separate lives. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to wrap up with Dr. Adrian Daisley after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It as we wrap up with Dr. Adrian Daisley, Ambassador Plenipotentiary to Barbados at the World Peace and Climate Change Diplomatic Organization. Long words for sure. Very, very good person, a good friend, and someone that I felt that we need to hear, because we need more Dr. Daisleys in our life, and to me, especially during these difficult times. In wrapping up, I want to ask you then about the crime situation, and we're sharing the videos and the anger. My last question to you: why do people share things that are negative faster than they share positive?
The bad news travels fast, but apart from that, we have a society. We built a society of negativity, Joya. If you think about it, places like Asia and those places are very, very, very prone to create an environment of conflict resolution, because they see, and I think this is something that we should start studying. Why are some places more peaceful than others? And even within the context of the peace peace dialogue, we ask ourselves, why does this country have more conflict than others? And invariably, it is always because of poverty. It is always because poverty begets lack of education, lack of information, lack of access. And so I think if we're going to really address the issue of crime, government is going to have to step up and find a way to not only empower individuals to help, but they're also going to have to look at what are the processes that need to be employed, whether it is bringing on board a psychologist or a psychotherapist. And to answer your question about why, I think the reason is because at the heart of being human is always that protective element. Is that element of I want to protect me from you. And unfortunately, we no longer live in a society where we feel vulnerable to be expressive of how we feel. We feel that we need to protect ourselves from even people that we love. And it's hard because I have seen that people don't really resolve conflict because they involve persons who are not a part of the process in order to help them resolve a conflict in a relationship that they haven't nurtured. And so the nurturing of a relationship that is broken is the first step. And I want to make it known that we don't talk about the children. We don't talk about the children who are the ones who really, really suffer, and the women at the hands of conflict within these environments, these situations, Joyanne, because we can no longer talk about a tolerable society, an inclusive society, a gender identification society, and a society that embraces others when you can't express yourself, when you have to hide who you are because another person is going to judge you. We need to create an environment where people feel protected by the law, whether we're talking about bullying in schools or we're talking about online bullying. We need to begin to use the resources that are available to us as a government to begin to put into place legislation that not only says you shouldn't do something, but these are the consequences for perpetrating those laws.
I want to thank you so much, Dr. Adrian Daisley. You could take up an entire show, but unfortunately we ran out of time, and I would love to have you because we need these types of conversations, and we need to be able to identify all of these things because this is what is killing us in our society. Our attitudes. Basically, that's it. Our attitudes to the way we do things and how we handle things and how we respond to the things that happen. It's what's really breaking down our society. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your presence here with us. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Cheers. All right, bye-bye.
Well, viewers, I was asked this morning and still getting some messages from people saying, Joy, you ain't got no more trees. You know what? We got more trees. So what we're going to do, because we're going to have our next guest, but throughout the show, the rest of the show, we'll give away some trees to people who may want to share their experience, or better yet, I would like a couple ways that you can recycle. Because remember, it's all about the environment and how we're going to fix this planet, how we're going to slow down climate change. And people, you just can't get the trees just like that. You got to be able to put something out there, let us know. And I don't mind if we want to, we have to give them to callers, regular callers. But if you're calling to tell us, make a complaint, we'll still give you a tree. But in particular, those who would be able to tell us how can we recycle, what types of things we can do to recycle, what kind of products can be recycled, and you are going to get some lovely, lovely fresh herbs. Look at those, look at those, look at those, look at those, that you can just put in your kitchen in a pot and clip them because they're all bushy and ready. And parsley is here on the screen. And while you're cooking, we would want to encourage you to have your own food. Prices are going up. And speaking of prices, we heard yesterday Prime Minister Mottley is giving a 6 months ease. What are your thoughts about that and the number of things that she would have listed? Is it going to help? It will, probably for 6 months. But then what is the plan after that? And perhaps we should just take one day at a time. And that's what I'm doing. You know, they say you don't have tomorrow put down. So if you do want some of those lovely trees and dwarf trees, I believe that we are also looking to get our hands on some dwarf breadfruit trees and some dwarf avocado trees. that you can get here right on the show. You don't have to wait 5-10 years to get fruit, to get vegetables. You can get them quickly, especially when you have a dwarf tree. The vegetable trays, what we're saying now that you can choose your variety from the plant shop in Sky Mall, Nature's Bloom, New Horizon, Nature's Bloom, and he will start actually sowing some seeds because we're going to do this for the next couple of weeks and to give you exactly what you want. So you may want a tray that is just okras and sweet peppers and tomatoes. We're going to do that for you. So you can call us at 228-5563 or 228-5562 if you do want a chance of receiving some of those trees as we continue here on Face It and Fix It to encourage you to plant your own food in an effort to prepare you for what may come. This is hurricane season. You know it's climate change coming. There are longer droughts. Cost of living is going up. You can't afford certain things. You need to help yourself. The government has offered a 6-month ease. Government can't do it by themselves. You got to play your part. So what are you going to do? So you can call us at 228-5563, 228-5562 if you want to get an opportunity to get some of those trees. We are going to be speaking with Mr. Maloney, Elvis Maloney, president of the Barbados Association for the Blind and Deaf. As you all know, on this show, every couple of weeks we made a commitment to put disabilities on the front burner. We don't wait until it's the month of the disabled. We don't wait for a special occasion. Right now, policies and legislation is being drafted on the rights of persons with disabilities in this country. A committee has been set up. I believe they have until November 30th to bring it. So Barbadians, please keep on that screen, because I find when it comes to disabilities, persons kind of just sort of just change the topic or they just walk away. And remember, you too can become differently able at any given time, because it's not about just born with something. It's about the fact that you're going to get old, you can lose a limb, you can go blind, you can go deaf. Even with the NCDs that people are suffering from as we speak, that could also happen too. Or in addition, I was also reminded that we have a blood pressure machine to also give away. And for that one, we will ask you the question, what is a good blood pressure reading? What is acceptable when you are the age of 50? At the age of 50, so if you got to go and Google it, what is an acceptable blood pressure reading? So, or what is seen as high blood pressure and low blood pressure, especially at the age of 50. So if you want to call us at 228-5562, 228-5563. I was just reminded, Joy, that we do have a couple of blood pressure machines that we have not given away as yet to help with Measurement Month, which has been extended to August 31st, so that you can manage your health. And the first thing you must do, from what we understand, check your blood pressure. It leads to a lot of problems. It leads to diabetes. It can lead to kidney failure. It leads to heart problems. Starts with the blood pressure in most cases, not all, but we were told if you can manage your blood pressure, so we can help you manage that blood pressure. If you don't have a machine and you want a blood pressure machine, call us 228-5563, 228-5562, and let us know. But you have to answer the question, what then is high blood pressure and what is low blood pressure at the age of 50. So I'll give you a hint. The top number and the bottom number, it can't go under a certain amount, because you really then would have low blood pressure, what is considered low, and then what is considered too high. So if you tell me something like, Joy, 200 over, okay, that's high. So you choose a number, but certainly there are blood pressures that are acceptable, and this is a way of getting you to learn that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to speak with Mr. Elvis Maloney, president of the Barbados Association for the Blind and Deaf, after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. I understand we have some callers in the line, so I'm going to go straight to them before we go to our next guest. Good morning, Face It and Fix It. You're on the air.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Ideal blood pressure would be 120 over 80.
Okay. That was easy. You Googled that.
Yes.
Is that the ideal blood pressure right throughout, or is that at the age of 50? I don't know. You tell me.
For a person at the age of 50, it is that, and I would know because I'm almost 50, and that's what the doctor told me.
Oh, very good. So basically, you're calling then to win the blood pressure machine. Can I ask you a few questions before you go?
Go ahead.
Can you share some of the ways that you manage your blood pressure in terms of nutrition?
Repeat your question again. I'm not hearing you clearly.
Can you share with some of our viewers some of the ways that you naturally manage your blood pressure, whether it's through food or less stress? What are some of the things you do to manage it?
Definitely through diet. So I eat things that are low in salt. So even when I'm cooking, I make sure that I'm very careful about the amount of salt that I use with my food. And I avoid the things that have a high salt content because that's definitely not a good thing to have happening. Moderate exercise, and that's it.
You exercise. And the environment that we are currently in with COVID and so on and so forth, how do you manage your stress?
Find things to laugh at. Find things that will make you laugh. Find things that will make you happy. I am a believer in Christ, so I pray a lot.
You pray a lot. Well, that's good. I mean, that's good advice to stick to a good diet. You said you're close to 50 years old, and she said, I would know because my doctor told me so, because obviously you're seeing a doctor. Well, we will lead the blood pressure machine, and I want the public to know this blood pressure machine is compliments of Total Care Pharmacy. It is located in Emerald City. I believe they have another outlet in Bridgetown in the city, but this one came from Total Care Pharmacy. Their branch is in Emerald City, and I want to thank the pharmacist there, Sylvester, for his kind donation, Total Care Pharmacy. But the blood pressure machine is going to be at reception today because I actually have it in my possession, and you have to leave your name and contact information with the producer and bring your identification card to the front desk at CBC. Next caller we have.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I hope you're calling about some trays.
Sympathy to you and your
Thank
family.
you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Another way of lowering your blood pressure is taking your medication.
Okay, but
and
that's
using enough vegetables, Christophine, and parsley also lower your blood pressure.
All right, but we're gonna ask you to call us back with something different because we have one blood pressure machine we gave, but I want to give you an opportunity to win some of those same vegetables that you're talking about and get some seedlings from Nature's Bloom and New Horizon Nature's Bloom. So I'm going to ask you to call back because I want you to tell us about recycling, because that blood pressure machine that we just offered was one, and the others that we're going to give away, the other things will be more on the trees side of things. But thank you so much. We do have with us now with Elvis Maloney, President of Barbados Association for the Blind and Deaf, and the individual who called and won the blood pressure machine. You do need to call back and leave your information, otherwise somebody else is going to come and collect it, and it may just be me. So leave your information if you want that blood pressure machine. Again, compliments of Total Care Pharmacy in Emerald City. I want to thank you so much for helping us out here to help people to manage their blood pressures by making sure that they have access to a blood pressure machine so they can monitor themselves and not have to wait until you get to a doctor to find out you have high blood pressure. Elvis Maloney, my friend, how are you?
I am good, ma'am. How are you?
Trying to hold on like everybody else. It's
Yes,
good that
that's
you're here. I'm glad that you're here. And I'm glad that you're here at a time that it has nothing to do with a particular week for the disabled, like people normally do. We only see and hear about it whenever there's a particular day. So I'm glad that you are here and that you're joining us. I want you to tell us a little bit, though, about the organization that you are the president of.
well. Good morning to our listeners. The Barbados Association for the Blind has been around well over 60 years now, serving the public through a smart making program, training, rushing as well. In recent years, recent in quotation marks, we've added MOPS, and then we've gone on to the academic side 2011 or thereabout, where we started offering CXC courses. And currently, we are in the process of doing what we now call conversational Spanish, which I thought is absolutely necessary. And I'll tell you a little bit about how that program actually came about, Joanne, sorry. We, we were stranded in Miami in 2001 after the Montserrat volcano had erupted, and the flight was postponed. I didn't think it was canceled. It left late in the night, but we were not privy to that information at the time. So while we were there waiting, all this Spanish was going on, and we were unable to communicate because we didn't know what was happening. And when I got back to Barbados, I told my partner, which is Mrs. Padmore Blackman, who was with me at the time on the trip, look, we need to start a program of conversational Spanish because we are surrounded by Spanish speaking and French speaking neighbors, and we cannot communicate with them. And this wasn't good enough. And we started the program, it got aborted, and here we are again resuming the program. So I'm just saying that to say that even though you are blind or have a disability, it does not stop the world from turning, and it means that we have to find ourselves doing what we can to be part and parcel of what's happening around us and with us on a daily basis. So that was how that program got started, and after aborting it for a while, we have resumed it. But we continue to offer services to blind and vision impaired persons as much as possible. Sometimes we will help with terms of gadgets and devices, things like canes and so on, things like that that we offer. But in addition to all those services, we continue to share our concerns with respect to the whole question of accessibility. And accessibility has been one of our major issues for a long time. Access because our sidewalks are not the most accessible, unfortunately. And I'm going to go straight into the heart of Bridgetown. Some time back, there were those lights in Bridgetown where the beeper lights, as you would know, they were active at the top of what we call St. Michael's Road, Bridge Street, as well as there were some further down by Shafet, and the crossing there by the bridge. Those went off simultaneously, the ones by Shafet and the bridge coming off the boardwalk. But I was in town about a month or more ago, and I was there standing at the crossing waiting for these lights to go off. And at first, I didn't realize that these lights were not working. So the traffic started to move again, and then when it stopped the second time, the traffic, someone said, "Are you waiting to cross?" I said, "Yes." And the person said, "Well, you can go across now because it's crossing time." And I thought that was a real pity, Joy, because for whatever reason that those lights had stopped functioning, I think people don't seem to recognize that blind people do traverse the city as well. And I would wish we could have more, but let's stay with the city for now. And with except for the assistance of the general public, I would have been there standing, waiting or having to make a decision when I probably think that the traffic had stopped, take the chance of walking without being aware of the fact that you actually were able to walk and then may probably move too late, then run the risk of being knocked over by something. And that is only one small aspect of accessibility. We can go on to talk about the cluttering of sidewalks and so on, people leaving things like bicycles on the sidewalk there by the railings where you would want to if you're going to cross the bridge, you would want to go on that side of the sidewalk to get away from the vendors who are on the other side plying the trade. But if you do that, you find yourself in a situation where there are obstacles on the railing, and then you may drift too far over on the right of the traffic, pedestrian traffic, and find yourself into those type of challenges. And I'm just wondering how we as Barbadians can begin to appreciate the fact that there are people with disabilities in our society that need to traverse the city and other parts of the country as well. And we need to make accessibility accessible. That sounds a little funny, right? But unless we are going to do this, it creates the problem for us on an ongoing basis. I know there's a general feeling socially that persons with disabilities should be at home, you know, perhaps eating and getting fat, and hopefully dying sometime along the road. And while that is a general process for everybody, the reality is that we still have to live, we still have to function, and we can't lay down our arms and wait for our relatives or friends to do everything for us, because that's not humanly possible. We are going to have those conflicts from time to time, so we may have to get up and do some of those things to help ourselves wherever possible with minimal assistance from the general public. But it is a major concern, and I thought that I needed to, wherever possible, get the opportunity to raise this concern, because it is not only accessibility to us, but whenever the city or any part of our country becomes accessible, the able-bodied benefits as well. So it isn't a question of that the disabled benefits and the rest of society is put out. By no means. Society also benefits as well from any adjustments made socially and infrastructurally, so that everybody can enjoy and participate in what's happening. I'll probably stop here.
Well, we're gonna listen. I'm telling you, listening to that, I think some people don't even understand the whole what you're even saying, because you didn't think about it. The lights, how important it is, and waiting and listening for them to change. And if you don't, and you know, if it's not working, what could happen? And if not for the general public, and I like the fact that the general public, we still have a lot of people still helpful. The entire world has not gone bad. But we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, more with Mr. Elvis Maloney, President of Barbados Association of the Blind and Deaf, after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. We are speaking with Mr. Elvis Maloney, President of Barbados Association of the Blind and Deaf. And most people probably don't even understand some of the challenges that the blind and the deaf and visually impaired go through in this country, because we don't have everything that we need to make it what we call a equal playing field, level playing field rather. So it makes it even more challenging. What are some of the things that the organization would like to happen in terms of some changes that you guys are discussing, maybe not at the moment, or came up at several meetings, and that you recognize this hasn't happened, this needs to happen, like now? What are some of those changes?
One of the other important changes that we were discussing in recent times, as I'm sure most of us are aware, by the end of November, early December, we should be having new currency, paper currency that is, and it is, as we would refer to, as plastic. And I really want to commend the government for moving in this direction, because I think that is a real good step in that it helps us to be able to identify the money much easier. The impressions will stand up a lot longer, and once the money is treated in a certain way and not really abused. And then on top of all that, I want to see, well, that is welcome. I'm happy for this. I would want to see where the banking sector, well, let me say the commercial sector, especially those enterprises, like the credit unions and so on, that would offer ATM cards, go the next level, because they have to make some adjustments for their own the money, the plastic money as we call it, that is coming out. And I'm appealing at this point in time that they would make the necessary adjustments to also ensure that ATM machines are accessible in the sense of audio. Now, I personally believe the same way that the iPhones and all the other Android phones have the talk back features. I'm of the strong belief that some of the features are already built into the machines. However, they may not have been activated for one reason or another. Again, it may very well be a question of society feeling that we don't need ATMs. I've had complaints from some of my colleagues. They've been to institutions, I'm not going to name them because they won't get the station in any trouble, but institutions that would have tell people, why you want ATM card? You can't see where you're going to do it. I suppose somebody do this and somebody do that. And I'm like, this is so silly. Anybody that, if you have a PIN and you don't share your PIN with anybody, they don't know your PIN number. And unless you do that and share your PIN, then how are they going to get access to your PIN? But then it is also your responsibility to ensure that you keep your PIN as safe as possible and share it with people or some individual that you can trust. So some institutions use this opportunity to, what I term, subtly discriminate against issuing ATM cards in some instances. One, and two, in addition to the discrimination, it also means that ATM cards, as I said before, where the talkback features can be activated, where you can put your headphones in and you can carry out your own transactions. And I believe it will be a lot easier to do now that plastic money is available. But again, if our society is going to become accessible, institutions have to recognize that these are the adjustments that are required in order to make, as you said earlier, a level playing field. Otherwise, we're always going to be at the mercies and disposal of other people unnecessarily. We're always going to need assistance, but there are times when we don't have to be that dependent. We can do some things on our own, but the commercial sector needs to assist us as well. So again, that is another change that I would like to see. And one other quick thing that I would talk about, and then relate that back to the lights. When we talk about, now we know that more and more individuals are moving towards the electric vehicle. And because they are silent, again, it makes it almost next to impossible to know that they're coming. So you have to be even more careful now than you were before. But again, there are devices that can be placed on these electrical vehicles that provide a level of noise that allow a blind person to hear when they're approaching, so that you know that an electrical vehicle is coming. And these are all things that are going to require, I know, and I will probably sound like trying to be some attorney or something, but these are things that are going to require some level of legislation. Of course, we can't legislate attitudes, but we would hope that when these pieces of legislation are passed, that they're also supporting bits of legislation to enforce the legislation. Because if we legislate and then there are no enforcements to ensure that things happen, then it's like, as we say in Bayesian parlance, spinning top in mud. You've got
Correct.
legislation, ineffective. It does not do anything. And I was fortunate to get home early evening this week, and I heard on another radio station an announcer was complaining where he went to park. He has a disability. He went to park and then found that all the parking spaces for persons with disabilities were occupied. And one particular vehicle was parked in an area for persons with disability, where apparently three young men got out and when they were laughing and having fun because they were able to park on the guys that once fella say he got broken foot, but no evidence was produced. Within seconds, a guy turned up with a disability, a real disability, but there was nowhere for him to park. Now my question is, yes, there's provision now made for parking, but if there was no action taken to ensure that those vehicles were either towed or clamped, that they couldn't move when they come back without the appropriate ID to prove that the person or persons using the park were an actual fact persons with disabilities, there's no point to it. People will continue to park and make fun. So we have to go beyond legislating. We have to also ensure that the laws are enforced. And I'll start by saying, unfortunately, it seems as though we have a lot of legislation, but we don't have the necessary enforcement to make it active and
We have
encouraging.
we call it we have a legislation without some teeth, and we need it to have a little bit of teeth, lots of
Yeah.
teeth in this case. But I want to ask you, Elvis, because I know that the association covers two types of disabilities. It's the blind and the deaf. Now, the deaf
Yes.
community have often complained, and I believe that these complaints were valid complaints for things that they were not included in. Now, here's a classic example: television and
Yes.
closed caption, where they can see but they can't hear. And now you have the
Yes.
news, yes, and I'm referring to CBC TV 8. But there's no caption as far as I understand for any local television to read. So outside of the news and you want to watch something else, you have in the news block, there's someone obviously who's signing for the deaf.
Yeah.
That's the news. Outside of that, there's nothing. Not even on this show, as we speak. So the exclusion, not deliberate, I guess it's because of resources, probably. But again, in order for the playing field to be a little bit more level, the deaf, they need a little bit more. So
Yeah.
what are we doing to help the persons in the deaf community? I can tell you this. I do have a small company called Hague Communications, and I am doing some videos for the Green Climate Fund under 5Cs, and all of those videos will have closed caption, and all of
Yeah.
those videos sensitizing the public and the Caribbean will have sign language. We have sign language for the deaf. So
Yeah.
it actually then covers everybody because it's on climate change, and climate change
Yeah.
is for everybody. And who is more impacted by these events of storms than the vulnerable people? So why would I not make a message that would not then cater to or allow for other people to understand it with all of the various disabilities, in particular the blind and the deaf? The question is, what is on the table for the deaf, and including that to CBC? Is there a way of having not necessarily the sign language person to sign during the news, but perhaps closed captioning on their local programming?
It's a long-standing issue that the deaf community and those of us within the disabled community be agitating for. But again, like for the most part, a lot of the issues are glossed over if ever touched. and then you will either hear something or you not hear anything. We'll probably have a discussion, and then after that it dies. Case in point, I was, and I'm not running away from the deaf community question, but I know there was an issue some time ago within the a young lady with visual impairment with some housing issues. But here's the issue. About 3 years ago, there was a Habitat conference which the Barbados Council participated in, and I represented the council at that meeting. And in my submission, I asked the question, what will government do to help provide housing for persons with disabilities? Now, we're aware that for the most part, persons who get with disabilities either get sometimes contributory, depending on if they acquired a disability during a period of time when they were working. There are some who were born with disabilities and therefore they were unable to actually work, and they may get non-contributory. There are those who are on welfare. But the reality is the income is small, and they can only do one of two things, either pay bills or buy food. And if they do one or the other, they can obviously continue with the others. So my question at the time was, how can this matter be addressed? I know there's some provision made for housing to some degree, limited, but I'd ask the other question. Suppose is it possible that an arrangement can be made where a person with a disability on a small income may get a longer repayment plan, a reduced repayment rate as well, with the idea that they're working towards achieving or owning part of this work, as we call it. That submission was made. Obviously, I heard nothing more on that matter. So the issue on housing, the issue on accessibility, the issue on unemployment, all of these are the issues which persons with disabilities face. And I don't want anybody to get the impression that we are selfish and we don't think that other people, quote unquote, able-bodied persons in society are not struggling with some of the same issues. Yes, we all are. But when you examine the facts, the realities are that we are the most disadvantaged. We are oftentimes the ones who are overlooked. We are the ones who are at the beck and call and the mercies of either the private sector, to a lesser extent government, or sometimes our own family members, depending on economic circumstances and some other factors that I wouldn't get into at this point in time. So the reality is that, John, when we come back to the deaf issue, again, there's a real need for a sit-down, not only a sit-down talk, because I get 30 talk shops going on, where we can have a discussion that moves us from the discussion point to understanding that the needs of the disabled are indeed equally as important as all other sectors of society, and we need to address those needs. If those needs are not addressed, a couple of things can happen. Persons with disabilities, given the opportunity and the right setting and adjustments, can contribute to their own personal development as well as that of society. So they don't have to become dependent on the state for whatever security benefits can be given. That's one. Two, again, if people begin to recognize that persons with disabilities have equally just as much ability to contribute not only to their own personal and social development, but also to help themselves and their family. That is another factor that I think a lot of people don't also consider. Because most of the time they don't think we have families anyway, or that we need families anyhow. A lot of people think that we don't have desires, drives, etc., want to get married, don't want to have families, etc., because we are seen as, I don't know what things to say. And I'm hoping that as we have talked about these sit-down sessions, that these sit-down sessions are then enforced by action taken to ensure that, as you would have said earlier, the playing field is level or made a little bit more level, that persons with disabilities can adequately and willingly contribute to their own development and that of the family as well as society as well.
Well, Elvis, I want to thank you so much for bringing a lot of this information to us and some of the challenges that the association has. And I can tell you that as I sit on the committee for for disabilities in terms of the legislation that has been recently formed. I give you my word, as I have all the other organizations that come on this show, that I would certainly do my best to make sure that all of what you say and all of the others, that people listen and they put things in place, because no decisions can or should be made as that committee has been represented by other persons with disabilities as well. No decisions should be made without consultation with the disabled community. That is going to be in the best interest of the disabled community, should not be made by other persons alone. So I want to thank you. Thank you so much.
And before you close, I would just want to say that I hope that the Commission knows and understands that the disabled community is behind the Commission, that the disabled community will support the actions of the Commission. So while we are, on the one hand, waiting for you to do your bit, I hope that the Commission also takes the opportunity to encourage us as the disabled fraternity to rally around and support the actions, especially when we know that those actions are indeed leading to a better quality life for persons with disabilities. I am sure that I'm one willing to take that role and encourage my colleagues to do similar. Thanks, and again, we look forward to working together to make this happen.
Thank you, Mr. Elvis Maloney. That was President of Barbados Association of the Blind and Deaf. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. Let's get straight to the phone line. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Yes, sir.
This is where you call and give the tips on conservation.
Well, we're looking at how you can recycle your garbage. What items in the house can you just not put into the garbage and maybe recycle at home? Do you have any tips?
The tips I would suggest that most Bajans have vehicles, so they could use their old car tires to start kitchen gardens and assist with the food prices and costs by growing small kitchen gardens.
So they can use the. How about? Let me just say this so to our viewers quickly. These trees have been sponsored by ProSource Limited. That is the company that you see. All of those beautiful garbage cans, they're the company that's responsible for putting them down. Perhaps they can take the garbage can, the old one, and use it to plant some of the trees and fresh herbs that you're about to get. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
All right. One more tip. You told me about the tires. One more before we go.
Another thing would be like the small kids You get this money. No, every year we change bikes, we change we better our families, change bikes, upgrade clothing, etc., etc. I assume we should be able to give some of those used bikes to the less fortunate and needy kids, and just not throw them in the garbage.
Pass it on if it's in good
Obviously,
if it's in good
condition,
if it's in
can.
good condition. Yeah. Well, yes. Fair enough. So, what type of do you grow vegetables? Or you know starting out?
Well, some small vegetables, but because I live in the country, by default I go buy fruit trees, banana trees, pear trees. I trying to start a small, more structured garden growing herbs, and I was interested even in the 2 lemon trees.
Well, I'll check on the lemon trees, but I know that caller was so excited when he won that lemon tree because it actually had on lemons and it was only about 3 feet tall. So this one is for fresh herbs, but
Okay.
again, I'm going to make sure we get the list of what will be available over the next couple of weeks. We are certainly trying to get I believe we have, but I am subject to correction, and if we don't have it yet, they're coming. The dwarf avocado trees, breadfruit
Right.
trees, and dwarf coconut trees. I saw the dwarf coconut tree, so many coconuts on that tree, and you can stand up and pick them and not climb up and risk dying. So I think it's a good thing that you're familiar with. And you see how many coconuts is beyond them trees?
Correct.
Enough.
I would love it, but automatically, coconut trees automatically drop the lemons. Coconut is the new wonder food.
Coconut is a new wonder food. It's important that we find foods that can grow a little bit faster, that are also good for us. I'm pushing dwarf trees as much as I can, appealing maybe to all of these companies that have these plant shops, and when you're importing, and the Ministry of Agriculture, see if we can focus on dwarf trees as much as possible because we can eat faster that way. So you do have to bring your ID card to Nature's Bloom, New Horizon Nature's Bloom in Sky Mall. At Sky Mall, that is New Horizons Nature's Bloom. It's the only plant shop. Ask for Mr. McFarland or anybody there. They normally help you. They're really good in terms of their customer service. And remember, the trees are compliments of ProSurf. So that phone call has dropped. You got another caller. Good morning. You are on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Like the lardol bottles, you wash them?
Okay, wait.
And
Stop.
cut them in
Repeat
half.
that again. Stop. Say that again. I missed that beginning. Tell me again.
Okay. Like for instance, like the cooking, the lardol bottles, where the lardol come in, you wash them. And you put some mud, and you could do your planting. That's the way of recycling for planting.
Girl, you win, girl, because I ain't heard that name lard oil for the longest time. But let me tell you, wash the lard oil bottles, the bottles that when the oil in, and that the oils come in, and plant and recycle. Same thing for even Clorox and bottles, and
Yes.
my caregiver Kathy does that. Her mom recycles. We got the last few minutes, so we got to wrap up. You got to bring your ID card to the New Horizon Nature's Bloom Barbados in Sky Mall and collect your fresh herbs and plant them in your lard oil bottle that you washed out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We are wrapping up right now. Yes, I can, but we are wrapping up about now, so I'm going to encourage all of you. I hope that you would have left your name with the producer, and if you didn't, okay. I'm pausing right now because my producer is talking in my ears to remind us that be careful where you plant your trees. And also talk to Mr. McFarland when you get there. He is actually guiding all of you for free to make sure that you have the right soils and manure and whatever help that you need. Then you get that information from New Horizon Nature's Bloom. So when you collect, ask Mr. McFarland what to do in case you're not familiar with planting. He is giving away tips for free. And just remember, the plants, the trees are complements ProSource Limited, and The trees can be collected at New Horizon Nature's Bloom. That is located at Sky Mall in Haggett Hall. Mr. McFarland, I want to thank everybody for watching and thank our guests this morning. And remember, people, it's all about peace. Try your best to see if you can resolve your conflicts. And it's not about check your egos, or keep them, or should I say, at the door when you walk into somebody's house or you walk into work and you got a little attitude. See if you could sort of check that ego at the door and leave it there so that we can all get together. Now remember, we are not on the show for the next couple of weeks. We will be back July 25th, Monday, July 25th. We will be off the air until July 25th. I'm Joyanne Haigh. This has been Face It and Fix It. Have a wonderful weekend and stay safe, everybody. Bye for now.